Without further ado, the very first thing that I will ask everyone who's new to debate is, what do they feel about debate? Is debate something that quite scary? Because when you hear the word debate, you feel like, oh, it's just two people arguing, right? And you have to be factually right or not, or something like that, right? But debate is, for me personally, it's not just a skill, but it's an entirety culture in itself. Because when you venture into the world of debating, you're not just there to learn like new things. You're not there to like master the art of debating, but you are there as a family. And in the end of the day, what we want to achieve here is to create this sort of belonging for everyone. Sure, there's some people eventually going to quit because of their own reasonings, right? But in the end of the day, what I want to achieve with debate is that we're creating some sort of a family, right? Like something that we each and every one of us can relate to, and that's how we eventually going to learn. So these are like few examples that what I have done with Swinburne Debaters Club in Swinburne here. I was the first to reignited the debate workshop, like outreaches to districts, like for example, schools that don't have access to debate. uh, I have my team back then to go around the whole of Sarawak to do this. SSIDC, one of the most major flagship that Swinburne Sarawak has to offer, whereby all, even like outer, like international countries come and participate in, and internal competitions like Swinburne Novice Cup, where we just have Swinburne students just argue each other, right? So now let's begin with debate 101, because everyone has to begin somewhere, right? Everyone has to start new. Everyone has to start from ground zero, all right? Why do we debate? Again, debate is entirely subjective, but if you were to ask me, it is one that you can understand each other's view, because not everyone's going to share the similar things that you have in common. Like, for example, let's say you want to talk about paper, right? Not everyone has the same view about paper. Sure, there's like a common nuance that you know, but not everyone's going to share the same idea when you think about paper. And through this, you can create this sort of clear communication between both sides and allow you to frame ideas and reach to a certain level of agreement, right? So that's the entirety core of debate. Debate is not about who's right or who's wrong. Debate is about who can we agree, like who can we agree to be right and who can we agree to be in the wrong. Because in the end of the day, again, it's a discussion, right? That's entirely is debate. And that's where I always start off. There will be no right, no wrong. It's a matter of how you want to persuade people thinking that you are right or you are wrong, right? It's essentially just like that. Okay. And in debate, especially in parliamentary debate or people that you want to do this discussion with, there usually will be two sides. One is the government or the proposition. I would like to call them proposition. And the other one is opposition in parliamentary debate, right? What does the proposition do? It's very simple. They propose their case and they have to agree with the narrative of the topic or whatever the idea that you have to elaborate on. Like there will be like an example later on in throughout the slides. The opposition, they have two ways to oppose what the proposition has to offer. First is either they oppose what the proposition's case is. So let's say proposition's case is that, hey, if I want to solve people not oversleeping is by like installing alarm clocks for everyone. Maybe opposition's like, hey, installing alarm clocks might not be the way to go. Maybe you need to have someone to literally shoot a gun right next to your ear. All right. So that means they agree that we need to solve people from oversleeping, but they disagree with which case that we want to prioritize, right? So that's what opposition do. Or opposition can outright just disagree with the motion. So let's say about oversleeping, right? Government, they want to solve oversleeping. Inside opposition, they can argue like, hey, oversleeping is not that bad, and here's why. So this is two ways that you can do as on opposition. Very simple. And in parliamentary debates, there are usually three like parliamentary debates, or what's not, like three formats: Asian parliamentary, British parliamentary, and world schools. I'm not so sure what you guys will have in like Lutong interest, like inter school, but I'm just gonna assume it's AP. Is it AP, Velen? So I can just like,
It's a modified WSDC, but it
it's a
doesn't.
modified WSCC. Okay. But okay, modified WSCC. Okay, sure. So if it's modified WSDC, I'm not gonna cover Asian parliamentary, but I'm just gonna run through all of these quickly. Asian parliamentary, 3v3, so that means in a team there's three speakers, first, second, and third, 7-minute speeches, 4-minute reply, and 30 minutes of prep time. So what is this 30 minute of prep time, or what is preparation time to begin with? Well, preparation time is basically the allocated time for you to prepare your case. Because in this debate, you're not going to be given the topic a day before. Usually, it depends on the competition, they do have that. But usually, in impromptu rounds, you will learn or you will like get the motion on that moment itself. So you'll be given this specific like time allocation to prepare your case. So that is time prep, right? So in AP, it's 30 minutes of time prep, 7 minute speeches. So that means the speaker must speak for 7 minutes. The first question that will be in your mind is, do I really have to reach 7 minutes? Not really. Okay. If you're a beginner, if you're new to debate, you don't really need to extend yourself until 7 minutes. Usually, what I would suggest is just speak as much as you can as long as within 7 minutes. So that means, let's say you can speak up to 3 minutes. Sure, just speak for 3 minutes. Because again, I like to re-emphasize this. Debate is entirely skill based because the more you practice, the more you get good at it, and the more you realize 7 minutes will not be enough as you go on, right? As you progress. So yeah, 4 minute reply. I'll explain what reply speech is, right? Okay, modified World Schools. So basically, WSDC is World Schools, so World Schools Debate Championship. Again, 3v3, but there are 5 teams. It's a 3v3 active speakers, but there will be a five like speaker in a team. So what do I mean by this is that only 3 speaker in that 5 team, like 5 member team, can speak. So there will usually be only one motion, so don't have to choose motion. Uh, Usually world schools 8 minute speeches. I'm not so sure about the modified one. There will be like their own regulation, what's not, so you guys have to go through that. Usually around 30 minutes or 1 hour prep time. Also, again, depends on the competition. They will tell you how much time allocation that you have, right? So BP, I'm not gonna touch this because this one is like a really complicated one. All right, so let's talk about debater's role. Okay, so why do we need to have roles? It's one of the most important questions out there. But if you can think it logically, it does make sense in terms of parliamentary debate, is because you want to have a coordination. Debate, especially parliamentary debate, is a team game, like it or not, because it's you have to introduce your case, you have to mention why your case matter, and at the end of the day, you have to compare your cases, right? Think of it like starting a company, right? Let's say you want to start a company. Of course, you cannot have one man the whole thing, right? You need to have your own. You have to be like you yourself is the CEO. You need to have your COO. You need to have your CFO. You have to have your CIO, right? These people to help you manage this company. Okay, so it's a team game. Now let's begin with the most common speaker roles that is just out there with every single debate parliamentaries, right? First, the first speaker. What do they do? Think of them like your prime minister. Like for right now, our prime minister is like Anwar Ibrahim. So think of the first speaker as Anwar Ibrahim. This first speaker, their main role is to create, elaborate, and share their case for the whole debate. So that means they are the very first person to speak in the debate for both sides, right? So in that case, obviously they're gonna mention like, okay, so this is how it looks like in our world. This is this and this is that, and they have to be supported with argumentations. And the main reason why I like to clarify this that they carry the largest burden is if your first speaker failed to give a very good case or they failed to elaborate their case, your whole team will suffer because your second speaker and your third speaker has to create some things up to help your first speaker in the first place, and this will take up time on your speeches. So that's why it's really important for first speaker to really know what they want to share. All right, and a typical speech format for first speaker is easy. First, case setup, and second, argumentation. It's like two sides, right? Like when you want to write an essay. Case setup. It's the most simplified way that I would like to branch it to is into this tree. Issue of the debate. Understand what is relevant for it to be discussed. Because in a debate, right, let's say it's this house would ban smoking. There are a lot of issues about smoking, but which issue do you want to cater more? Is it issue about the health of the smoker? Is it an issue about the secondhand smoker? Or you want to cater the issue towards what is in the content of like the cigarettes or whatever that people smoke nowadays, right? There are a lot of issues, but you have to narrow it down and specifically mention which one is relevant towards this debate, right? Again, first question that people would ask, how do you know which issue should be relevant? throw back to what I mentioned earlier, there is no right or wrong. You just have to prove us why. So in this issue that you chose, you just have to prove the adjudicators, you have to prove to everyone why you chose this issue, why is it relevant, and in the end of the day, why it must be discussed, right? Second, stance. Stance is basically what your side agrees and want to stand with. So what do I mean by this is that in the end of the day, right, you need to have some sort of like your solution towards this issue. Let's say the issue that I want for this house with ban smoking is, oh, it harms the user, so the user probably going to get cancer. So in the end of the day, why we want to ban smoking is that we want to curb the amount of deaths from smoking, and we want to improve the overall health for the whole community of Malaysia, right? So that is your stance, what you agree with and what you stand with, and how you want to solve it. And you want to solve it later, you explain your argumentation, what's not. Characterization. Characterization is basically you explaining, right? Because if you go into like a random table at a kopitiam with your uncle, with your auntie, suddenly you talk about skibidi toilet. They don't know what skibidi toilet is, right? And if they do, I don't know what they're watching on their phones. But so you have to explain to them what is skibidi toilet and why does episode 296 is very significant for the whole plot, right? Something like that. So you have to explain in detail, like this is what happened, this is what this side is, this is what this side's that, right? So let's say in the relevance of this house with ban smoking, what do I like to characterize? First, I probably would characterize who are the smokers. Why do they smoke? Maybe they smoke because they want to release stress. Maybe they smoke because of, for the fun of it. Or maybe they just want to smoke because they want to look cool, right? I just explained this, and that. So I'm characterizing what these smokers are. And then the next thing I would like to characterize is what are cigarettes or what are they smoking. Maybe there's like, just again, I will describe what cigarettes are. Maybe cigarettes have harmful substance. Maybe cigarettes have less harmful substance or what's not. So I'm talking about cigarettes. So I'm characterizing cigarettes. So that's basically characterization. You describe these things in further detail so that a lot of people understand the context of what you're talking about. Because again, like what I would say to people, especially they're new, no one knows what you're talking about. No one will know. So if you don't give them the context, then they don't know what you're talking about. Then everything will be, in shambles basically. So yeah, argumentation. So this is like the second half. So argumentation is basically how you want to justify your case, right? A lot of people always get confused with argumentation as an extension of characterization. Well, it is basically, but not really. Argumentation is basically why you claim your solution works in the end of the day, and how can you back it up. Like, for example, claim. What do you think will happen, and why will it happen? Right? So, for example, if I were to ban smoking, why would how and I would say in my solution, and I would say that, oh, because if you ban smoking, people will have better health and what's not. Why do I think that will happen? Because through banning cigarettes or banning smoking in general, less people smoke. If less people smoke, then less people inhale harmful substance in their body. Then that means no harmful substance. Maybe they don't die. All right. So this is my claim. So you have to justify why your solution makes sense in your argumentations. And then you do framing. So framing is basically analyzation of your claim. So what do I mean by analyzation? Is basically you cannot just come here and tell your auntie and your uncle, give me 50 ringgit in ang pao right now, right? You have to justify why. You have to analyze why you need that 50 ringgit. Three layers. First layer on truth, second layer on significance, and third layer on impact. This is the most basic bare bone. First layer on truth is basically why is it true for you to say it, right? Let's say that in my argumentation just now for this house of ban smoking, smoking reduces, and by banning smoking, we reduce the amount of people that's dying. Okay, why? Truth, less people smoke. All right, that's the truth. Less people will smoke because we ban smoking. So that's the first layer on truth, right? We have already proven why. Second layer of significance is why is it significant for me to share this, right? Uh, Basically, why is it important for me to preach this out to you? It's as easy as that. And third layer of impact is basically how is it going to affect the people on the ground? So let's say, how is it going to affect the smokers? How is it going to affect the secondhand smokers? So basically, the actor in your debate. I will explain more of this framing thingy later on throughout the slides, but that's basically the whole gist of it. And tie back is basically how it relates towards your stance. So let's say, oh, throughout my argumentation, I claim that less people would die, and that means my stance, which is saying that less people smoke means less people die as a solution through banning, makes sense. So that's a tie back. Essentially, it's like that. Second speaker. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for second speaker, because first speaker, they're passive, right? They just do what they've wrote. They will do whatever that they want to say and whatever context that is needed in the debate, right? Second speaker, they are more of an active speaker. So what do I mean by an active speaker is they have to do two things. First, they have to deliver their own content. Second, they have to attack their opponent. Okay, so think of them as how do I say this? Let's say you're playing Clash of Clans, all right? I don't know if you guys do play Clash of Clans. Let's say you play Clash of Clans. First speaker, what they do is they build your base, right? You know, like your town hall level 7, whatever. You just build whatever. And when you want to go attack people in clan wars, you have to defend your base and you have to attack your clan that you're going against with. So that's second speaker. Entirely, they refute and engage with the opponent's team while delivering their own argumentations to support their case. So that's basically what I meant by an extension of the speaker. Okay, typical speech format: rebuttal and argumentation. I'm going to cover more on rebuttal because argumentation is going to be similar with what the first speaker is. Okay, but before that, should stakeholders be clarified by first speaker before entering into structure? Yes, they should. The earlier you want to deliver it, the better. So that means, let's say the stakeholders in this debate is A, B, and C. If first speaker covered that, fantastic. Easier job for the second speaker, easier job for the third speaker. If first speaker didn't mention it, then your opponent, first speaker, can easily say, hey, they didn't mention this actor. I'm going to make my own stakeholders. Your second speaker will cry out loud. They will cry because they have to mention which stakeholder is significant in the debate. They have to explain this stakeholder and what's not, eating up the time that the first speaker should have done, right? So second speaker has less things to share on their side rather than the opponent. So then your opponent will have more and more things to add while your case is meh, you know? So that's why it's important. So yes, should be clarified by the first speaker as soon as possible. All right, where was I? Rebuttal. Rebuttal is basically analyzing what is wrong with your opponent's case, pointing out and explain why yours is better. A lot of people always do this thing where we always call it as a one-liner. So one-liner is basically, oh, opponent said A is wrong. Never explain why. So how can we as the judge and what's not, how can we as the judge know why exactly is it wrong? We don't know what you're talking about. All right, let's say opponent has argument A, you say argument is wrong because of this. Okay, so why? You don't explain in detail, right? So that's why you have to explain why, point it out, explain why, and mention why yours is better. So that is rebuttal. I'll explain more later in details. But before I go into third speaker, yes, Emily has another question. Sorry to interrupt. How about setup of venue as well? Yes, setup of venue is under characterization, basically under case setup. So setup of the venue is there. Yeah. So everything that's needed to be given context, first speaker should do it first. Because first speaker is context giver. They have to mention the context because they're the first to share their case, right? So let's say you go in a court and your lawyer don't know their case, then how can your lawyer fight for you? You're gonna lose the battle, right? So first speakers have to set up the venues, have to set up the actors, have to set up the debate as a whole. What second speaker do is support the first speaker. Again, if first speakers have mess about or they have some things that didn't mention in their speech, sure, second speaker can add up, but again, will eat up their own time. So that means they spend more time fixing their case rather than giving out why their case matter. So that is why it's really important for the first speaker now, right? If your first speaker fumble, then the whole team will high chance fumble. So yeah, that's how important it is. I hope that clarifies it. Now, third speaker. Oh boy, third speaker is the most fun role because you don't do anything. Literally, as the third speaker myself, it's the most fun role and it's the most annoying role to be in. Why is it annoying? It's because you have to listen. Okay, you have to really listen and understand. So that means you have to understand what is different between both sides. You have to listen your side's argument and you have to listen your opponent's side argument. Because why do I mean listening game matters as a third speaker? Again, you may have wrote, like let's say you as a team collectively may have wrote the best script, the best case ever, but you will not share exactly what's on the paper. Your first speaker and your second speaker will for sure miss out certain things and for sure will add new things that were like wasn't being discussed or weren't being discussed in the first place. So this is your role as a third speaker to analyze and understand what your side has spoke, like what your side has spoke so far, and what your opponent's side spoke so far as well, right? And you have to differentiate the differences, what both sides want to achieve. So this is why third speaker is the easiest to play and the hardest to master, because the in, the winning tip, especially if it's a really close debate, will be given to the third speaker. The third speaker has to really, really like draw the fine line. And third speaker as well, they gaslight. So if you have a friend who really loves to rage bait you, who really loves to find out what's wrong with you, either confirm they already third speaker. So yeah, typical third speaker speech format is rebuttal and clashes. And why specifically rebuttal and clashes? And this is the first time you want to say, hey, there is no case set up, there is no argumentation. What's going on with third speaker? Third speaker, just like I mentioned before, just listen. They don't add anything. They just listen and then to have to say, hey, this is the difference between this and that. So they cannot give new materials. They cannot give new argumentations. They only can give newer analysis. The most common question is when people ask me, hey, Adrian, what is thus the difference between a new argumentation and a new analysis? Year by year, this is the most commonly asked question in WUDC, in WSDC. So that's why the judging handbook always change. But the difference between a new analysis and a new argumentation depends on if it has been spoken in a debate. If it has been spoken before the third speaker, and the third speaker were to elaborate more, that's a new analysis. If it has never been mentioned throughout the entirety of the debate and the third speaker were the first to bring it up, that's new argumentation. It's as simple as that. So, third speaker, just analyze. All right. How do you analyze? Rebuttal, clashes, case comparison. So yeah, that's basically it. Rebuttal, analyze what's wrong in the opponent's case, point out, explain why it's better. And third speaker, entirely you have to focus on things that really matters in a debate, not something that is knick-knack, right? Because second speaker, they probably just rebut for the love of the game. Third speaker, you have to rebut specifically at which point or which angle your opponent's the weakest at, right? So basically the contention of the debate as a whole. All right. Again, it's hard for me to explain how do you want to do a rebuttal because rebuttal is practice based. So yada yada. Right? Clashes. All right. This is where third speaker flourish the most. Clashes is basically what both sides wants to solve but disagree with methods. Again, throwback with what I've mentioned earlier on this house would ban smoking, and basically what's the difference between proposition and opposition. They want to achieve the same thing. They don't agree with how they want to reach that end goal. All right. Proposition, they want to ban smoking because, probably they say, oh, we want to save the user's health. Opposition might be like, oh, we also want to save the user's health, but banning smoking is not good. Probably there will be counterfeit cigarettes. Now, this is where you as a third speaker have to analyze, right? What does both sides want to achieve? They want to achieve betterment of users' health. Which method is better? So this is where you as a third speaker have to flourish. As proposition, you obviously have to be biased and say, oh, our side is better because this is and that. And as opposition, you have to mention why your side is better, like, oh, this ours is better. Whatever proposition say is not true. All right. Now, how do you want to do it? Through framing, analyzation, and framing. First layer on truth, why is it true for you to say it? Second layer of significance, why is it significant for you to say it? And third layer on impact, how can it affect people on the ground? Again, there will be like much more slides of me explaining it in detail. Lastly, is in clashes is weighing. Weighing is comparison, i.e., what's the difference or how much of an effect it has on this one particular actor. So weighing, there's four. I'll give like a much more detailed speech format later on. Don't worry, I'll give you like some QR code if The QR code don't work. Don't worry, Velen will text me about it and I'll share you guys the document, right? So weighing is basically you do comparison which one matters more in the debate. Is it side A or side B? Or is it proposition or is it opposition, right? So that is weighing, right? Measurement. It's like, weighing scale. It's basically like that. So which one is heavier? Is it side government or side opposition? It's like that. Now, reply speaker. Oh boy. Reply speaker gives comparative. Uh, Basically, what do I mean by comparative? Is the comparison of what has been said between both sides and mention why your side is much more better. It's just a short summarization, essentially, as its goal. So it's just that you have to be biased, lah. Of course, you have to support your own team. You have to be biased. And reply speakers are usually from either the first or the second speaker, right? And 4 minute speech. Typical speech format, again, comparative and clashes. Discuss as comparative, again, what I already mentioned. Discuss what both sides has talked about and judge it in your own lens. So that means you have to be really biased and saying, hey, our side is much better, ma. Feel free to be biased, yeah, whatever, yada yada yada, and emphasize why yours matter more, even if you have a logical fallacy. Logical fallacy is, I think, self-explanatory. Even if your case is terrible, you still need to mention why yours matter more. All right, you have to figure it out one way or another. But before I continue, what if there is no direct clash in the debate? How should I wrap up as a third speaker? Simple, do weighing, give comparative, which clash matters more? Which idea matters more? Which analysis matter more? Is it oppositions or is it propositions? Basically, it's like that. So that's where the third speaker is really, really interesting because they have to really figure out like why your side matters more, right? So how should you wrap as a third speaker? I'm not so sure what you mean wrap as a third speaker, as in like ending, but uh, I think rap as a third speaker is just how you usually end your speech, right? Summarizing. Oh, summarizing. You explain what has happened in the debate, yada yada yada, and why your side is better. It's simple as that. So that's how a third speaker do. Again, third speaker entirely debate based. All right. It's very hard for me to explain how you can do it because third speakers you need to be in the debate to actually do it. All right. First and second is easy because you can just prepare a script. Third speaker you need to be in debate to really master it. All right. It's very hard for me to share. It's something that is really really hard for me to share. You just have to do it to get better at it. Okay. Clashes again. The difference between reply speaker and the third speaker clashes. There's not much difference. Just mention what both sides agree to solve, but disapprove the methods, framing, and weighing. So if you are confused, I'm sure most of people are here confused. Emily's been asking good questions. So I hope whatever Emily asks is what you also have something in common in your mind. But let's say, hey, I had no time to scan, I have no time to take photos, I have no idea what's going on throughout this whole thing so far. Don't worry, I made a QR code. I believe in this QR code should be how a typical speech format is, how I started when I was new in debate, and I progressed throughout until my varsity debating. So this is basically should be the absolute bare bone. Again, you will ask, Adrian, do I have to specifically follow this? Not really. You can have your own way of doing things. Because again, debate is subjective to people. Like the way I coach schools may be different on the way how Velen coaches you, or maybe and when it's your turn to coach people, maybe your way of teaching and sharing ideas is different to your future generations. It's something like that. But this is more of a general guideline of what you want to do if you have nothing, like you have literally have nothing to work with. So I hope everyone has scanned. So I'm just gonna give like 5 seconds. If you guys wanna grab a drink or something, feel free to do that. Because after this, it'll be a absolute blitz because there's nothing much to share after this. It's gonna be about argumentation. It's gonna be about rebuttals, and it's also gonna be really boring. So if you have any snacks, you have any drinks right now, go feel free to take it. It's gonna take at least 20 minutes of just pure yappery, right? We'll begin around 9:35 or when 9:35 hits, something like that. Yes, sir. Yeah, nice thumbs up. Okay. All right, 9:35. Right, so I don't want to delay too much. So let's continue. Let's talk about motion types. Oh boy, my favorite. And if you're going to be first and second speakers, will be your favorite. Enter speaker will be your favorite because you don't have to do anything, right? So motion types. Again, a debate cannot be manifested with if there's no proper topic. So the main goal of a motion is to lead a discussion of the topic. So basically, what the idea is or what's not, yada yada yada, what you have to debate about, right? So there are three kinds of motions. Again, in the debate world, it's always dynamic. Sometimes there are new motion types, and I'm not even aware of it because the handbook is always it changes every single year. So the most common that you'll see in competitions, especially in high school debates, are these three: analysis, policy, and actor. So wow, really complicated and heavy words. Don't worry, it's quite simple. Analysis motion is a motion that assumes. So basically, you just have to analyze. That's it. It's just that simple. It's an assumption game. Because in an analysis motion, like for example, mostly phrase, this house believes that, this house prefers, this house regrets, yada yada yada, there's no need of a policy. And most of your argumentation is opinion based. So that means you don't really need to be factually correct. I mean, it is much better if it's factually correct, but you don't really need it to be that. So you can just assume that this might happen because this has happened before, yada yada yada. You just have It's just an assumption game. So that means the likelihood is 100% based on the debate and how the first and the second speaker as well as the third speaker has to say about it, right? So let's say this house believes that Adrian is tired right now. Why do you believe that Adrian is tired? I don't know. He's probably speaking slower than usual. Probably it's 9 o'clock and it's about to reach 10 and he wants to sleep. It's opinion. You don't know that Adrian is. You don't know that Adrian is tired. You don't know that he wants to sleep, right? It's opinion based. So the likelihood is entirely up to debate, and you have to explain why it is so that Adrian is tired because of what you've mentioned, right? So opinion based. And in analysis, there's two kinds: truth value debates and value judgment debates. True value debates, oh boy, oh, it sounds so complicated. Actually, very simple. A discussion whether or not the statement is true or false. Okay? This house believes that Adrian is sleepy. Is it true or is it false? As government, you have to say it's true. As opposition, you have to say it's false. It's a yes or no question. So it doesn't need to have a counterfactual. What's a counterfactual is basically like something to counter, like add on more substance from the opposition side. I'll explain more in detail later. Or an imaginary scenario as input noted in status quo. All right. So basically, just yes or no. There's no in gray lines or nothing. Just yes or no. It's simple. It's really direct. Value judgment is, oh boy, it's very interesting. It's very niche. It's very not great. Value judgment debate is morality based debates. So that means you have to judge what people have done so far. So this is basically this house regrets, this house prefer, this house supports, this house oppose, yada yada yada. Those kind of debates. It's basically a discussion of scenario must be created to describe fully to comprehend. Because in value judgment debates, the debate will not make sense if you don't have a parallel world. A parallel world means what if this happened and what if this doesn't happen? What will happen in between these two worlds, right? And why this world is much better than the other. So that is value judgment debate. It's a morality based debate. So that's how you in the debate you can actually see the difference between like both sides, and essentially it's that's it. So next is policy motion, a motion that needs to have an action. Uh, so mostly like phrased as this house would, this house as, this is wood, whatever that has wood on it, like not wood as in kayu, like wood as in mungkin or will be. So it's a question of the policy should be enacted or not. It's not a Again, this is the most common misconception about this policy motion. A lot of opposition just assume the policy couldn't work. All right. I mean, yeah, they can do that, but it's not the best way to go as an opposition. It's a policy is about whether or not this policy should be enacted or should it not be enacted. Because the government has a lot of fiats on this. So what is a government fiat? I'll explain much more in detail later. Essentially, proposition team will have the largest burden because they have to prove why their policy makes sense and why they need to be enacted. If government does not mention this at all, why their policy makes sense and how their policy when it's enacted, actually will be great, government will be insta losing the whole debate. Opposition will win. Opposition has to do literally nothing and they will win, right? So this is why it's really tricky for government to do this kind of motions. And when you heard this sort of things, like this sort of nuance and everything, you'll be like, damn, government, not really fun lah. Not fun being government, this one. Actually, it's fun because you have a lot of life-saving like perks here. Proposition fiat. So what is essentially proposition fiat? Proposition fiat is basically something that assumes that you can just do it. All right. So whatever you say in your policy, yeah, you can do it. So let's say this house in if you want to this house as Malaysia would curb traffic jams, or our policy is to increase elephant as a mode of transportation. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, you can enact it because the question now is whether or not you want to enact that policy or do you not want to enact. Government has whatever they want to do, right? It's free. It's a free ball. Like they can say whatever they want, and the policy makes sense because oh yeah, it's proposition fiat. However, it does not mean that it immediately brings beneficial impact. Just because you have the fiat, it doesn't mean that having elephants on the road will directly curb traffic congestions. It doesn't mean it works that way. You need to prove what are the beneficial impacts of having elephants on the road rather than cars or public transport, right? It's simple as that. So it has to be proven until otherwise. And when you, as an opposition, is debate, it's like, oh, it sounds scary now. I want to be government. Don't worry, you also have your own fiat, not that strong, but you have your own thing, right? So opposition fiat is basically allows the opposition. Oh, I forgot to word this out. Allows the opposition team, my bad, opposition team to defend the status quo or counter propose. Okay, so opposition has two methods here: defend the status quo or counter propose. What is status counter propose? What is defending status quo? So in policy debate, it's a debate about policies, right? Whether or not it should be enacted. Defending the status quo means defending what is happening right now. So let's say it's an undeniable fact that Malaysia is having the worst traffic congestion. We'll just let it be. We don't need to have any policy because the whatever policy proposition say sucks and everything, and it will not work in the end of the day, right? Or you can counter propose by saying, hey, their policy don't make sense. Let me make my own policy instead. Now, why is counter proposal not really recommended unless necessary? Because it's on the heaviest burden of first opposition leader or the first speaker of opposition side, because they have to mention why specifically government's policy don't make sense, why their policy will make sense, and how it actually caters towards the people on the ground. All right. So if you don't know how to do that, try not to cut the propose yet. Again, entirely skill based. You don't know if you know how to do it, if you don't make mistakes on it. But I would just suggest you to defend status quo, defend as is, right? That's my first suggestion. All right. Oh, and also in opposition fiat is that you also have the same amount of resources as government. So what do I mean by that is whatever government say they have, you also have, right? It's shared basically. Actor motion is simple consideration of parties involved. Basically, this house as Malaysia, blah blah blah. This house as Adrian, blah blah blah. Right. So that means you have to debate under the perspective of the actor, which is X, right? Whoever X is. So in this debate, like for example, this house as Malaysia would ban public transport, or this house as SMK Lutong would make everyone have their own bottles, right? So whatsoever, what's not, right? So this debate then will turn policy motions, will turn analysis motions into actor motions. Because now you have to consider X or the actor here. You have to consider what does Malaysia understand or what does Malaysia has of the values or the national, like basically what the Malaysia has. This is where the first speakers had to really flourish in explaining the actors and how can it affect with the solutions. Because whatever the best perfect solution that you have as a government or opposition might not be what this actor feel is the best. So that means you have to understand their knowledge, they have to understand their moral view, they have to understand their obligation and responsibility and interests. So I have to really take note of what the actor really wants to do in the end of the day. So that's actor motion. Really complicated, but it makes sense if you debate in the end of the day, right? Now, argumentation. Very simple because I already mentioned a lot previously. Argumentation is basically a process of forming, communicating claims based on supported information, blah, blah, blah. So basically, I want to support my case. That's argumentation. Imagine of building a tower, right? You want to build a tower very tall, you want to build Burj Khalifa. Your case setup is the foundation, very thick foundation. The better your case setup is, the thicker the foundation. Now you need to have the pillars to set the wall, the pillars to stabilize the tower as it goes higher and higher, right? So your argumentation is basically the pillar, okay? So without the pillars, of course your tower is not going to stand up. Of course it's going to be slanted, leaning tower of Pisa looking. So yeah, that's the main purpose in argumentation. A well-structured argumentation will be more convenient because it's much more fairer. Everyone knows, blah blah blah. So yeah, yada yada yada. All right. What are the step processes? Very simple. 5 ways. 5 methods. Method dumping, contention, supportive claims, call-outs, tieback. Okay. I'm gonna mention more about method dumping contentions because the last three I already mentioned it previously throughout the introduction, right? So meta dumping is basically whatever you think you write down first. So let's say you think about water. Okay, let's talk about water. The anything that you know about water, you just write it down, right? For example, water can do a lot of things: simple, medium, tasteless, odorless, blah blah blah, right? Readily available. Then when it comes to the debate, this is when contention says, like, for example, if the topic is about this house would weaponize water. Now, whatever you have written down, right? Then you will single out, okay, which one should I bring in and which one should I bring out? Okay. So from previously where there's like a lot of things like, oh, can be simple, medium, tasteless, blah, blah, blah. Now I narrow it down towards the relevancy of the debate, which is this also weaponized water. So now water can do a lot of things. It's simple, medium, ready, available globally. So basically life's essential. So it's simple down. So single out and contention is that way. Okay. Supportive claim, the core of an argument. Again, claims. Let's set up this motion really quickly. This also supports the remilitarization of the EU. So let's do method dump. What should we really talk about this motion? Let's highlight it. So the value judgment debate already know this are supports. Core idea is remilitarization. Needed context is EU. What is EU? No one knows EU in this debate. Okay, EU is a political economic union, uphold peace and promotes shared values among the 27 European nations. So basically, it makes from a multiple markets into one market and from multiple entities into one entity. Right? Basically, they want to develop together. Why the need of remilitarization? Because more aggressive Russia and potential shift in US foreign policy. So they don't really have a military power. The only strong military power they have is NATO. And NATO heavily rely on United States. So this is why they need to have the need for remilitarization. The incentive is there. Okay, so you already explained remilitarization. You already explained EU. So how am I going to do the claim? So two things that you already note is that the political shift is already there, it's drastic, and remilitarization is really needed because for the security and integrity of European Union. As a proposition, how can we support the case we have made? How can we deal with the opposition call out and relate with a sense of relevancy, right? Very simple. First claim, you say that it will reduce strategic dependency on NATO. Why? 3 layers of truth, right? I mean, 3 layers of analysis. First layer on truth. Why is it true in the context of debate? Because it's true because EU relies heavily on NATO and US. Without NATO and US, then all the EU member states don't have military power to actually counteract with whatever the global insurgencies are. So they die lah. So basically something like that. So this is why it's true. This is why it's urgent for them to do. Why is it significant? So again, judging the debates based on facts don't work if you don't know how to prove why is it significant to use those facts. Like for example here, EU current limited military coordination. Basically, it just makes them like, they don't have proper military. They don't have like, even if they have a military, it's not strong enough. And the global threats is there. It's very like mainstream. So a unified EU military structure will basically just make them stronger collectively as a group, basically making a whole global super power of militaries, right? Layer of impact. So basically, how would the stakeholder be affected in debate? It's very important for you to share this, is because in the end of the day, it's easier for your third speaker, it's easier for the judge to know, oh, this is how the people on the ground is going to be affected. Basically, again, layer of impact is how people will be affected. Throw back to what I mentioned before this. It will be a great strategic autonomy, allow EU to protect itself and protect its interests so they don't have to really rely on US, they don't really rely on NATO, and eventually don't really need to buy into whatever, or don't have to subscribe into whatever US beliefs are, like political beliefs, don't have to subscribe what NATO beliefs are, right? So, and with a global, like with a unified EU military, probably they share more of whatever the European security needs really are. It's not just about having the best fighter jets, probably having the best navy, right? Something like that. So those are layers of analysis. Call outs. Okay, now call outs very simple. Let's talk about preemption. Preemption is basically predicting. Okay, You as a government, probably you don't know what you're going to talk about, right? Let's say it's a very new topic, it's very new, it's very niche, and you don't know what to talk about. Or maybe you do know what to talk about, but you don't know what opposition might say. So you just make up whatever your opposition might say. Let's say, as in this debate, right? Do I make this? Okay, like for example, opposition might say, "Oh, it's going to be harmful because EU, they don't really have any collaboration to actually do this, or what's not, or they so heavily rely on NATO and US to the point that if they were to be severed off ties and everything was not, they crumble immediately." So this is probably what opposition might say, and you as government will predict that they will say this, and you have something to talk about it, right? So basically, that's preemption. So basically, you trying to predict what your opponent might say. First, you strengthening your argumentation because your opponent might say this, but because of this new argumentation of yours or this new analysis from that argumentation of yours, counters what the things that you predict what your opponent might say. So your opponent has nothing to go against with you again with that. So they have to do something new. Make it make sense. It's really confusing, but basically you just want to defend yourself better. So let's say again, opposition want to say, oh, they are now crumbling because they are no longer unified. Even if you want to say EU can remilitarize, what is the benefit they are going to do this? They're losing more out of it. So because of the already layers of analysis and wherever I've mentioned, right, rely heavily significance. If we can do this, we can make it much more EU based. Impact is that EU don't can cater towards European security needs. So that means now said opposition cannot say this is not true. Opposition, because now we can already prove to a whole table, to a whole debate, how EU can be really independent in the end of the day to defend themselves, right? Now, this is where tie back happens. So basically summarization. So therefore, by developing this sort of like remilitarization of EU, then it will directly achieve the stated goal of reducing strategic dependence on NATO, on US, enabling greater European autonomy, and focuses more on European national threats, right? It's basically like that. So that's a tie back. Now, rebuttal, just give me like 3 minutes, very simple, because rebuttal is practice based more than theory based. Rebuttal is basically you rationally refute, critique, or you point out flaws in your arguments, the opponent's argument. So, again, they already mentioned practice based and theory. So I'm just gonna mention to you how it looks like. I'm not going to say how exactly the per scenario because it really varies. There's no pre-select scenario of how a rebuttal looks like. It always changes. It's dynamic. It's not static. So I'm just going to mention to you how the step processes of you doing a rebuttal in hope that you can apply it in this upcoming like debating championship. Okay. Step processes: identify, analyze, compare. So identify what is wrong. Okay, maybe your opponent have a flawed argumentation. Maybe the case summarize, or maybe the case that your opponent gave, something's wrong into it. Something is puts you off. So analyze the argumentation or analyze that case, identify what is its flaw, and you write it down. Oh, they have like this logical fallacy, they have this paradox within their own case. Point it out. Why is it wrong? Now you analyze. And what metric is it incorrect? And what are there level of analyzing why your opponent is wrong? Because there are lots of way that you can analyze. One, maybe it's like logical fallacy, just what I already mentioned. That means whatever they want to say, they want to prove in the other day, will not be proven with this argumentation, will not be proven in that case solution. And why is it so? And how yours is better. Second thing is it doesn't link up with the actor's main issue or actor's interest. You can also point it out and what's not, blah blah blah. I think my speech format QR did mention specifically on this. Again, if it's not available, just hit me up or just tell Valen about it and I'll share it to everyone. And lastly is compare. Why is yours better? Why is your solution? Why is your case is much more better than your opponent? Oh, maybe it's because it's better because it really does cater to people on the ground. Maybe the effect is highly much more effective, or the likelihood of it's happening is higher than what the opponent might say, blah blah blah. So it's comparison. So that's basically rebuttal. That's basically the end. So do you guys have any question? Again, it's not gonna reach until 1 hour. It can be verbally, you can also text. Uh, I don't want to make it longer than 10 because everyone sleeps at 10. I assume here, everyone here sleeps at 10. So I don't want to extend it that long. Tomorrow, my teammate, which is Zohairi, which is also your super senior, is going to cover almost the same thing, but much more detailed. So I am doing this some sort of like a warm up for you to understand, trying to understand what he's going to teach tomorrow, because his is much more complicated. Right? Are there any questions before you guys go? No questions. So far, Emily Liu has been the most active here. Really nice. You are a very good third speaker, because in case prep, everything third speaker always asks a lot of questions. As a third speaker myself, I do attest to that. It's true. It's like a global fake. Right. Anyone else aside from Emily Liu has any questions? No questions. I mean, you can just open your mic and ask questions and text. I'm gonna leave it that Q&A session until like 9:57. If there's no questions, then we just basically wrap it up. All right, one more minute before the whole thing wraps up. Yeah. If there's no question, I mean, you can just ask. I mean, you can also ask Velen. Velen is much more better than me anyway. So I'm a man that's been pulled out of retirement. All right, 5:07 is about to come soon. Like 10 more seconds before it's 9:57. If you guys ask question at 9:57, I will just okay, I'll answer it. But I'm just gonna be like, whoever wants to go, he can go, kind of. All right, it's 9:57. All right, so no questions. All right, I hope everyone understands, or you don't really understand and you're like flabbergasted. Don't worry, I'll share the slides to Valen. Valen will share it to you guys in case you guys need to check through everything. It's always available. Don't worry about it. So that means it's over. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, you guys can go. Yeah, yeah.